Imagine waking up one morning and deciding to erase everything you thought you knew about yourself. Not with words, not with promises, but with something raw and visible. A clean slate, a blank canvas. That's exactly what happened the day she shaved her head. It wasn't some wild rebellion or a shallow fad. It began quietly, almost like a whisper inside her, an itch beneath the surface, a question nobody else could answer. For years, she had worn the weight of expectation like a heavy coat, a coat stitched with threads of fear, doubt, and the stories she told herself about who she was supposed to be. Hair was just hair, sure. But for her, it had become a symbol, a mask hiding a truth she wasn't ready to face. This wasn't about vanity or shock value. It was about confrontation, a challenge thrown to the mirror and the world. Here I am. No more hiding. She was caught in a cycle, trapped by the same routines and roles that once gave her comfort but now suffocated her spirit. The reflection staring back was familiar yet foreign. Something had to change or she'd never find peace. The moment the clippers buzzed through that last strand, it was like a door slammed open. Suddenly, she was exposed, vulnerable, but undeniably free. It was a radical act of self-love and fierce honesty, an invitation to step fully into her own power without apology. The plot twist? Shaving her head didn't make her less. It made her more. More authentic, more fearless, more alive. Her journey wasn't about hair at all. It was about shedding old skins, breaking chains, and embracing the messy, imperfect, wild heart beneath it all. And the promise here? That sometimes the most beautiful transformations come when you dare to strip away everything that's holding you back and stand bare in your truth. So if you're stuck in a place where comfort feels like a cage, remember this story. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let go of the familiar, even if it scares you, because on the other side of that fear lies a freedom you never imagined. And who knows, maybe your own moment of shaving your head, whatever that looks like, is waiting right around the corner. The decision to shave her head was not something made lightly or on a whim. It was a moment born out of deep reflection and an urgent need for change. Sometimes life puts us in a place where everything feels stuck, where the familiar no longer serves us, but instead holds us captive. For her, hair wasn't just hair. It was woven tightly into the fabric of who she thought she had to be. It carried the weight of expectations, some from others, some she placed on herself. Every strand was a reminder of roles she played, identities she clung to, and fears she tried to mask. When she looked in the mirror, what she saw was not just a reflection, but a story. A story of comfort zones and invisible walls. The image staring back was safe, but it wasn't real freedom. She realized she had been hiding behind her hair, allowing it to be a shield between her and the raw truth inside. It was easier to maintain appearances, to wear the familiar look, even if it meant feeling trapped beneath it. But the itch beneath her skin kept growing, an internal push that demanded she confront what was really going on. Choosing to shave her head was an act of radical clarity. It was saying enough to the clutter of thoughts, the doubts, the chains of a should and a must. With every lock that fell away, she felt layers of expectation dropping too. What remained wasn't just a new hairstyle, but a declaration. She was ready to face herself without distractions, without the soft armor that hair provided. It was a physical shedding of the past, a clean slate where she could start rewriting her story from scratch. This choice disrupted the usual flow of her life. It made people notice, but more importantly, it made her notice herself in a way she never had before. She confronted her vulnerability head-on. The mirror no longer reflected a carefully curated image, but a raw and honest presence. There was a moment of discomfort, yes, a sense of exposure that came with letting go of something so familiar. But within that discomfort was a powerful kind of freedom. The freedom to be seen as she truly was, not as the version of herself she thought others expected. Shaving her head was an invitation to authenticity. It wasn't about losing something, but about gaining a deeper connection with who she really was beneath all the layers. It forced her to be present, to stop hiding behind symbols and instead stand fully in her own skin. Every buzz of the clippers was a step away from old stories and toward something new and uncharted. That moment carried a quiet but fierce strength. It was a challenge she threw at herself, to live without disguise, to embrace uncertainty, and to trust that her worth was never tied to appearances. It was the kind of decision that shakes you to your core, not because it's reckless, but because it's real. It's the kind of change that can't be undone because it touches the very essence of who you are and who you want to become. In making that choice, she was not only redefining her relationship with herself, but also inviting others to reconsider the masks they wear. It was a reminder that sometimes the most visible changes reflect the most profound internal shifts. And while it started with hair, it quickly became clear that this was about so much more than what meets the eye. Her hair had quietly become much more than just a physical feature. Over time, it took on a weight that few could see, but she felt every day. It became a symbol of everything she believed she needed to be, a kind of armor stitched together by expectations and fears. Society, culture, and her own inner voice all whispered what she should look like, how she should present herself, what was acceptable and what wasn't. Her hair was a way to fit in, to be safe, to appear strong even when she didn't feel that way. It was a mask she wore without realizing how tightly it had wrapped around her identity. Every curl, every strand was a thread in a narrative she had unconsciously accepted. That narrative told her to hide vulnerability, to appear polished and controlled, to avoid the messy parts of her soul that she feared others wouldn't understand. It told her to hold herself to standards that were exhausting and impossible to maintain. What started as a simple expression of style gradually became a cage, a silent reminder of who she thought she had to be instead of who she truly was. She began to notice how much energy it took to maintain that image. There were routines tied to it, rituals that demanded time and care, but also invisible rules she followed without question. How her hair fell, how it was styled, how others might perceive it. All these small details carried immense weight. It wasn't just about appearance, it was about control. Holding on to the mask felt safer than risking what might happen if she let it fall away. But beneath that surface, there was a growing restlessness, an ache that something was missing. She realized that by holding on to this symbol of identity, she was also holding on to fear. Fear of being seen as imperfect, fear of losing approval, fear of the unknown parts of herself. The hair, which once felt like a protector, had slowly turned into a barrier between her and her own truth. This realization was painful. It forced her to ask difficult questions. Who am I without this mask? What parts of myself am I hiding behind this image? What would it mean to step out into the world stripped of this familiar symbol? The answers weren't easy to face. They brought up vulnerability and uncertainty. But they also carried the possibility of freedom. The act of shaving her head was a deliberate breaking of those invisible chains. It was a rejection of the stories that had been written for her, the expectations that had shaped her identity without her permission. It was a way to say, I am more than what you see on the surface. I refuse to be defined by appearances or by the roles I was told to play. In that moment, cutting away her hair became a powerful metaphor for breaking free. Each lock that fell was a piece of the old story letting go. It was an invitation to discover who she